Do you know what you would like this evening, sir?
Yes, I think I do. I'd like some fresh, clear, well-seasoned perspective. Can you suggest a good wine to go with that?
With, what, sir?
Perspective. Fresh out, I take it.
I'm afraid your dinner selection?
Tell your chef Linguini that I want whatever he dares to serve me. Tell him to hit me with his best shot.
My name is Ricky, and I'm a full-time video editor and writer, and this is my channel. No preamble, let's get into it. We open on the world itself, the full human experience on a pale blue dot floating through the cold dark. As we move through space, we're given context of the locations and times in which our stories take place. Paris, the modern day. Miami, the 1980s. All the while, news clips flesh out historical context, building the worlds we are about to enter.
And his dazzling ascent to the top of fine French cuisine has made his competitors envious.
Amusing title. Anyone can cook. What's even more amusing is that Gusteau actually seems to believe it. I, on the other hand, take cooking seriously, and no, I don't think anyone can do it.
And then we're there. Both of our protagonists locked in struggle with powers that mean to do them, and by extension us, harm.
First of all, I'm a rat.
It's in these opening minutes that both of our lead characters tell us verbatim who they are. To us, to themselves, and to the world.
I have a highly developed sense of
Remy, a rat with a passion for food and keen sense of smell that allows him to sniff out rat poison.
Whoa, don't eat that! What's going on here? Turns out that funny smell was rat poison.
The world is not kind to rats. Tony, a violent fascist formerly of Batista's army with a rap sheet and prison tats. The world is not kind to rats.
That's pretty funny, Tony. No, that's true. It was a Canadian tourist.
After becoming acquainted with the world and environments our stories take place in, we learn about our leads and become familiar with our supporting cast.
Emil, my brother.
Remy and Emile are brothers in a colony of rats, living out of sight in an elderly woman's home in the French countryside. While Emile is content to live the life of a rat, Remy, relegated to poison checker on account of his extraordinary sense of smell, strives for more and is inspired by the famous Gusteau, a renowned chef, restaurateur, and author, to become a chef himself.
Pure poetry.
But it was not to last, and the broken-hearted chef died shortly afterwards, which, according to tradition, meant the loss of another star.
Gusteau is dead?
Wrapped up in his daydreams, Remy ventures too close to their host, resulting in a chase, a shootout, and the eventual discovery of the entire colony. As they fall from the ceiling and crash to the ground, they evacuate to the nearby river in the hopes of reaching safety. But as they make their escape, Remy falls behind and is separated from them as they dodge incoming fire. Remy anxiously paddles his way into the dark tunnels of the sewer, but loses his family, tumbling down the pipes into the waters below. Tony and Manny are brothers of another sort, a bond forged in blood fighting against Castro on the side of Batista. Having just got off the boat, they've been grilled by every American official possible and confined to a refugee camp. And while Manny is content to chase a quieter life away from armed conflict, Tony dreams of strong-arming his way to the proverbial top.
Come here, man. I gotta talk to you. Okay, come on, man. It's important.
So close.
While Ratatouille starts before our inciting incident, the inciting incident in Scarface is the Cuban Revolution itself, taking place prior to where we come in. Both of our leads are primed to seek more than they've been offered, more than just sniffing out rat poison, more than just wasting away in prison. Both Tony and Remy have escaped from places where people would gladly shoot them, where they stand, fled by boat, and arrived in the New World, starving. After fleeing from the French countryside, Remy, now washed up in the sewer, is plagued by the imaginary specter of Gusteau himself.
Go up and look around, Remy.
Cold, alone, and desperate, he talks with his imaginary friend until he works up the nerve to go above ground and finds himself
Now go up and look around.
in Paris.
You've led me to your restaurant.
Remy's curiosity gets the better of him, and he makes his way toward the restaurant. It's here that we meet Linguini, a down-on-his-luck young man desperate for work with nothing but a letter from his mother asking nicely to please give her son a job.
Get a job.
It's made immediately apparent that Linguini is an awkward, clumsy nuisance. All the while, Remy gloats from above, noting how insignificant Linguini is in comparison to the rest of the kitchen staff. A rat, quite literally, looking down on a man.
No.
How do you know? What do I always say? Anyone can.
Gusteau refutes this disparagement, and as he does, Linguini does something unexpected.
That is not stopping him. See?
What is he doing?
And in a fit of panic, Remy accidentally tumbles into the kitchen.
What? He's ruining the soup! We gotta tell someone that he's not.
Narrowly avoiding death several times, Remy makes his way to an open window near the soup station, only to stop dead in his tracks when met with the rancid smell of Linguini's soup. Unable to resist the urge to correct and perfect it, Remy dances around the pot with wild abandon, doing everything within his ability to turn the soup around. It's here that Linguini catches him in the act and swiftly squares him away under a colander. Upon noticing the new garbage boy in the soup station, Skinner, the head chef at Gusteau's, chews Linguini out for cooking in his restaurant on his first day. But as he's distracted, the altered soup goes out with the rest of the orders. In a rage, Skinner prepares to fire Linguini on the spot when word comes back that the customer who ordered the soup, a food critic undercover, loved it. As Skinner bullies and threatens Linguini further, demanding he reproduce the soup, Remy escapes from under the colander, and the entire kitchen rushes to catch and kill him.
What should I do now? Kill it.
Under orders to relocate and exterminate Remy, Linguini takes him riverside, where they chat and eventually come to a mutually beneficial agreement.
So I'm not crazy. Wait a second. I can't cook, can I? But you can.
Through trial and error, the two find the best way of working together.
You okay up there?
Remy riding atop Linguini's head, controlling him like a marionette. Eventually, the two reproduce the results of their soup just days prior. Skinner begrudgingly accepts Linguini into the kitchen and places him under Colette's watchful eye. This is their big break. In Scarface, Manny tells Tony of a sketchy proposal ran down the line through several parties in a sick game of telephone. Frank Lopez, a pillar of the Miami scene, wants someone dead. Omar Suarez is looking for the killers to do it. And Tony and Manny are more than up for it. The task is simple. Kill a man in the camp, and they can have their papers and a job. The man in question is Emilio Rebenga, a former general in Castro's army. Tony and Manny enthusiastically jump at the chance.
It'd be a pleasure. I kill a communist for fun, but for a green card, I'm gonna carve him up real nice.
They stab him to death in the middle of a riot. As Rebenga lies on the ground, writhing in his last moments, we smash cut to a government office and a picture of Jimmy Carter's smiling face, watching as Tony and his friends get their papers. This is their big break. Skinner is not a happy man. Skinner is not a fair man. Skinner is a miserable snake and a masochist. If Skinner had his way, he would fire Linguini for simply deigning to breathe the same air as him. But Skinner can't fire Linguini. They are both, for better or worse, tied at the hip. Skinner now beholden to the popularity Linguini has started to bring back to the restaurant. But after receiving a letter from Linguini's recently deceased mother, Skinner learns that he may have a bigger problem than a young, talented upstart.
Get my lawyer.
Linguini is Gusteau's son, and he has a legal right to the restaurant, though no knowledge of his ancestry.
There's not much resemblance.
There's no resemblance at all.
Confronted by this revelation, Skinner launches a private inquiry into the matter alongside his lawyer, who suggests they do a DNA test to disprove this claim. Skinner resigns himself to sabotaging Linguini and, unwittingly, Remy in the interim. Fearing a very serious, very illegal change in the tides, Skinner takes advantage of Linguini's newfound fame when customers begin to ask for new dishes. Seeing this as an opportunity to tarnish his name, Skinner tasks Linguini with recreating an old and failed dish of Gusteau's. Sweetbreads a la Gusteau. Lamb brains with a seaweed salt crust, cuttlefish tentacle, Douglas puree, geoduck egg, dried white fungus, and drizzled in anchovy licorice sauce. Colette, Linguini, and Remy set to the task immediately, but Remy resists the whole way through. Rather than following the recipe, he takes control of the situation in direct opposition to Linguini and Colette's wishes, changing the sauce entirely, and thus the entire dish with it.
I'm not. Sorry.
But immediately after, word comes back that the dish is a hit and more orders come in. The apparent success of the dish shakes the kitchen, and the crew spends the whole night preparing it throughout the rest of the shift. Remy and Linguini, despite damaging their relationship with Colette, manage to survive a suicide mission and deliver beyond what anyone expected. Omar is not a happy man. Omar is not a fair man. If Omar had his way, he would shoot Tony where he stands, but Omar, for the sake of professionalism and a chain of command that he is beholden to, can't kill Tony. Annoyed and short on patience, Omar points Tony and Manny in the direction of the Colombians. If they can scope out the situation and buy 2 kilos, they make themselves $5,000. Tony, Manny, and 2 friends head to the hotel where the deal is taking place and walk right into a rip-off job that goes absolutely, horribly sideways.
I just want to get to know how I do business, please.
You just fucked yourself.
Ambushed from behind, the Colombians grab Tony and Angel and proceed to work on them with a chainsaw. Angel is diced up as Tony is forced to watch. Manny, meanwhile, finally gets the suspicion that something is wrong. As the Colombians prepare to work over Tony, he and Chi-Chi burst into the hotel room and gun down several of them, though not before Manny is hit and the leader of the Colombians escapes onto the street. Tony, a force of nature fueled by adrenaline, pursues the leader and executes him in front of a crowd of dozens. Having lost Angel, the trio grabs the coke and speeds off before the cops can arrive. Tony and Manny, though not unscathed, manage to survive a suicide mission and deliver beyond what anyone expected.
I ain't taking it to Lopez myself. Yeah? Now you, me.
Tony and Manny are finally brought to meet Frank, a jovial sycophant of a man and a central figure of the drug trade in Miami. It's here we're also introduced to our central love interest, Elvira, a cynical party girl with a coke habit, and Frank's girlfriend. Frank is thoroughly impressed with Tony and Manny's work, and after establishing a rapport, invites them to his favorite club, where they spend the night schmoozing and discussing further business. Frank gives Tony the lay of the land and courts him with drinks, cigars, and the promise of riches. Walled in by Omar and Frank on both sides and being promised everything he wants, Tony is putty in their hands. Struck by boredom, Elvira moves to the dance floor and Frank encourages Tony to go with her. As Tony attempts to get close with her, Omar and Frank remain behind to remark on Tony's underclass essence and his potential usefulness if treated correctly. Tony attempts, rather poorly, to flirt with Elvira, only to be stonewalled by her apparent apathy and several racist remarks.
I'm just trying to be friendly, you know?
God, I have enough friends. I don't need another. Especially when I just got off a banana boat.
You're thinking of someone else, maybe?
Aren't you part of the Cuban crime wave?
This, however, does not deter Tony, and he presses further, adding her to the long list of things he wants in life.
A chick he's with. She like me.
I say be happy with what you got.
Me, I want what's coming to me.
Oh, well, what's coming to you, Tony?
The world, Chico. And everything in it.
Having overcome the sweetbread trial, Linguini and Remy take the night off to revel in their success. Skinner invites Linguini into his office under the pretense of celebrating their partnership, but with the intent to pry into Linguini's background. Suspicious of his culinary education and association with rats, he plies Linguini with wine and questions further and further to no avail. Unsuccessful in his attempts to garner any information, Skinner leaves Linguini to clean the entire restaurant by himself, and must remain satisfied with the DNA sample he presumably grabs during this time, though it's not explicitly shown. Testing Linguini's DNA to Gusteau's is his only hope.
Take a break, little chef. Get some air.
While Linguini drinks with Skinner, Remy is allowed the rest of the night to himself and given a full spread to enjoy in the alleyway. It's here that he runs into Emile, scouring through the trash.
Emile? Oh, I can't believe it. Why? I thought I'd never see you guys again.
I figured you didn't survive the rapids.
And what are you eating?
I don't really know.
Reunited, Remy runs back inside to grab his brother some real food, but Gusteau objects to stealing from the kitchen. Ignoring his conscience, Remy meets Emile outside with his stolen gift.
Only think about the taste.
After eating, Emile excitedly invites Remy back to see the colony and their father. Arriving back in the sewer, Remy is welcomed with open arms but makes it a point that he can't stay, much to the disapproval of his father.
I'll be able to visit often. Visit? I will, I promise.
The two get in a heated argument, going back and forth as to their places in the world, but Remy insists on the life he's fallen into.
Who are not as bad as you say.
In response, Remy's father brings him up to street level, where he shows him an exterminator's storefront, a window full of poison, traps, and dead rats.
Take a good long look, Remy. Now this is what happens when a rat gets a little too comfortable around humans. This.
Remy's father argues that this dichotomy between humans and rats is nature, and that it cannot be changed. Remy disagrees and wanders off into the night with full conviction in his ideals.
Where you going?
With luck. Forward.
Returning to the restaurant the next morning, Remy finds Linguini passed out on the kitchen floor after a night of cleaning. Colette arrives right behind him, and Remy scampers under Linguini's hat and attempts to wake him. Unable to do so, Remy continues to puppet Linguini as Colette talks in his direction, receiving no response. Upset, she slaps him, and it rouses him from his sleep. Confused as to what happened, Linguini chases after Colette, and feeling the weight of his secret, nearly reveals Remy's existence to her. But before he can do so, Remy pilots him directly into Colette, resulting in a kiss. Linguini and Colette embrace the moment, and Remy manages to keep their secret another day. After some time with Frank, parading around Miami with Manny, and harassing Elvira, Tony decides it's finally time to go home. Not to Cuba, but to his as-of-yet unmentioned mother and sister. Showing up uninvited, we learn that they had arrived in America a few years prior, and Tony was deliberately kept at arm's length. Now, his sister Gina is a full-grown woman. Gina, having not seen Tony since she was 15, is happy to have him back in her life. Their mother, not so much. Fully aware of the choices her son has made in the past, she sees through the obvious glitz and glamour and clocks that Tony could not have possibly earned his money legitimately. Tony brings Gina jewelry and offers their mother cash, all things either directly purchased with or consisting of drug money. After a huge blowout, Tony's forced to leave, but Gina chases after him, and they speak for a brief moment.
That's your son! I wish I had one. I'm sorry. I don't know, Mama. Ever since Papa left, she's...
Forget Papa. We never had one.
It's here that Manny sees Gina for the first time, and is fully and immediately enamored with her. Tony gives Gina the money, and before Manny can get a word in edgewise, Tony chews him out for even looking at his sister.
Hey!
Stay away from her.
In Bolivia, Tony and Omar meet with Alejandro Sosa, a drug kingpin with a large manufacturing operation looking for partners in the States. Frequently interrupting and overreaching, Tony negotiates poorly and overcommits Frank and his organization to a deal that is just too big. Omar takes ire with Tony bargaining on behalf of Frank, and Sosa is called away. As Omar continues to try and put Tony back in his place, Sosa takes a phone call and observes them from afar. Returning to the table, Omar tries to backpedal the negotiation, and Sosa suggests they break for the day and resume talks tomorrow. He asks Tony to stay behind and directs his men to take Omar to Santa Cruz, where he can catch a flight back to Miami. Sosa and Tony continue their chat, and Sosa casts doubt on Omar's legitimacy. He hands Tony a pair of binoculars.
This garbage was recognized by my associate at London.
His men hang Omar from a helicopter. Sosa elaborates, revealing that Omar was a police informant and calls Frank's judgment into question. Tony makes his disgust clear, and the two of them hash out an agreement.
I only tell you one time. Don't fuck me, Tony.
Upon returning to Miami, Frank is not pleased. Having lost his right-hand man and now obligated to this deal, he makes it clear that Tony is on thin ice. He begins thinking of how to deal with him.
Hey, Tony. Remember I told you when you started, the guys who last in this business are the guys who fly straight. And the guys who want it all, they don't last.
You finished? Can I go now?
Tony prepares to knife Frank in the gut, but for now, he plots. Immediately after Colette and Linguini kiss, we're met with a brief aside and introduced to a new character. Anton Ego, restaurant critic. A death knell for any chef that dare cross his path, and who takes offense at the mere notion that Gusteau's could ever be popular again.
Finally closing, is it?
It's come back. It's popular.
Resolute in his previous and final review of the restaurant, he sets his sights on Gusteau's once again and will, most certainly, be Remy and Linguini's final obstacle.
How could it be popular?
Meanwhile, Skinner meets with his lawyer to discuss the DNA results, only to learn that Linguini is, without a shadow of a doubt, Gusteau's son. Troubled by the prospect that this information could upturn a multi-million-dollar brand, Skinner decides to hide all relevant documents and hopes to wait out the deadline in the will. If he can keep things quiet for 3 more days, Linguini will have no way of claiming the restaurant.
I was worried about the hair sample you gave me. I had to send them back to the lab.
Why?
Because the first time it came back identified as rodent hair.
Having presented the deal to Frank, Tony, feeling untouchable, begins making deals of his own. He proposes to Elvira in secret, and they agree that Frank needs to go first.
Frank is not gonna last, okay? He finished.
Arriving at the Babylon Club, Tony encounters a detective who is intimately familiar with his background and record.
Am I gonna bust your wise-ass spit balls here and now? So the word on the street, Tony, is you're bringing in a lot of yay. Supreme Court says that your privacy can be invaded.
Okay, how much?
See?
Big number.
Yeah.
How do I know you're the last cop I'm gonna have to grease?
Well, that's not my business, Tony, you know.
As their conversation comes to a close, Frank enters the club, and a very impatient Tony gets overly aggressive and pushes his luck hard.
Hey, Tony, what's your 5-year-old girl?
You're gonna do something?
You're fucking right, I'm going to do something.
Frank and Elvira turn and leave.
Huh? Looking good, honey.
Immediately after, Tony and Manny spot Gina on a date.
Omar, he's fertilized.
Furious that his adult sister could possibly be seeing someone, he and Manny grab the man she's with, and Tony threatens and hits her. Manny escorts her out of the club, and while driving her home, they realize there's a mutual interest between them. They consider dating behind Tony's back.
What about you?
A lawyer. What are you talking about?
I see the way you look at me, Manolo. What do you think, I'm blind? I see.
Back at the club, drunk and with his guard down, Tony is ambushed. The resulting firefight leaves several dead, including the would-be assassins. The encounter nearly kills him. As Linguini and Colette grow closer, Remy is pushed to the side.
What?
Try this. It's better.
After work, he and Colette depart from Gusteau's, and Remy is flung from the back of Colette's motorcycle. Dazed, he narrowly avoids cars and dodges glass bottles thrown from afar as people scream in disgust. He hides in the sewer for the night.
And it just kept getting better.
After a near-death experience, Remy returns to the restaurant the next morning, where his brother, having fallen into a rough crowd, immediately pressures him into stealing more food for them. Remy reluctantly agrees.
No, there is not. Wait here.
He enters the kitchen and, finding the fridge locked, goes to search for the key in Skinner's office. Confronted by several Gusteaus, he rationalizes stealing food and elects to ignore them.
You think I'd be hacking barbecue over here? A microwave burrito? I cannot control how they use my image, Remy. I am dead.
Shut up!
But rummaging through Skinner's desk, he finds Gusteau's will.
Here it is. Hey, your will.
Curiosity gets the better of him, and after opening the file, he finds further documentation, proving Linguini's claim to the restaurant. But as the realization washes over him, Skinner walks in and catches him in the act. Remy snatches up the papers, and Skinner gives chase through the streets of Paris, avoiding capture several times. Cornered, Remy throws himself off a boat and glides to safety, as Skinner plunges into the Seine. Arriving back at Gusteau's, still drenched, Skinner finds Linguini and Colette in his office. Quick to protest, he demands they leave and is immediately presented with the documents Remy took. The crown passes on to Linguini. A changing of the guard. In the ensuing moments, we go through a montage of what this new life looks like for everyone involved. A complete overhaul of the business, a new apartment with a view of the Eiffel Tower, complete and unmitigated access to the kitchen stores, a deepening relationship for Linguini and Colette, and a rising prominence that paints a target on Remy and Linguini's back.
Come on, get your clothes on and meet me in front of Lopez Morris in 45 minutes.
Furious at the attempt on his life, Tony quickly gathers a crew of close friends to handle Frank once and for all.
We fucked up. He got away.
Arriving at Frank's dealership, Tony, Nanny, and Chi-Chi stride in armed to the teeth.
What are you doing? Tony, what happened to you?
Frank tries to convince Tony that he had no hand in the hit, but Tony's accusation is proven correct when Frank takes a call and reacts as predicted.
No, don't worry.
Tony calls Frank out on the obvious smoke and mirrors.
You a piece of shit.
Why the fuck would I hurt you?
I stay loyal to you.
Unwilling to bend, Frank proceeds to beg Tony for his life, and Manny executes him.
Jesus, get out now! No, shoot that piece of chip.
No.
The crown passes on to Tony. A changing of the guard. Left in the room with Detective Bernstein and Frank's bodyguard Ernie, Tony turns his attention to them. The detective attempts to play it cool and argues his importance, but Tony, having nothing but contempt for the man, shoots him twice and kills him.
So long, man. Have a good trip.
Fuck you! What about Ernie?
He offers Ernie a new job and welcomes him into the fold. Tony and crew leave the dealership, and Tony sets off to claim Elvira. After waking her from her sleep, he takes a smoke break. Soaked in blood, he stares longingly out the window and into the sky above as the Goodyear blimp sails through the dark. It flashes a message. The world is yours. In the ensuing moments, we go through a montage of what this new life looks like for everyone involved. untold wealth and power brought on by Tony's new business arrangement with Sosa, a new mansion with wall-to-wall custom furniture, a redistribution of opportunities for the people in Tony's life, a wedding for Tony and Elvira, a shot at romance for Manny and Gina, and a rising prominence that paints a target on Tony's back.
I'm bringing in twice as much as I ever did before. We're doing 10 million, 15 million a month.
Settled into his new lifestyle, the drug trade has been very, very kind to Tony. But while weekly duffel bags of cash might sound amazing at first, there comes the element of one of life's two inevitabilities: taxes.
Come on, give me the chick. Come on, Jerry, let's talk.
Urged by his banker to start moving their money smarter, and by Manny to stop overspending on security, Tony scoffs at the idea that anyone can take away what he believes he's so rightfully earned.
Counter-surveillance stuff.
I don't give a fuck.
It's already 12% of our adjusted gross. 12%. It's not peanuts.
I don't give a fuck.
His ego more inflated than ever, he becomes even more abusive to the people around him, especially Elvira and Gina.
You're an immigrant spick, millionaire, who can't stop talking
Who the
about
fuck
how
you
much
calling
money
a
he's
spick,
got,
man? You
or
white
how he's
piece of
getting
bread.
fucked.
Get out of the way of the
Why don't you
television.
just dig a hole in his eye?
Where you going? Come here! Help! Help me!
One night, while counting cash, Tony is caught in a sting operation and arrested, predictably for violating the RICO statute.
You're not kidding. Put him up against the wall. You're under arrest for violation of the RICO statute.
He posts bail, and his lawyer manages to delay legal proceedings, but the walls are closing in.
5 years. You'll be out in 3.
Able to avoid consequences for the moment, Tony is called away to Bolivia, where Sosa and a slew of government officials involved in the drug trade call upon him to deal with the mutual nuisance.
You have a problem, Tony. We have a problem.
If he can assist in the assassination of a journalist exposing their identities and involvement, his allies can help him avoid jail time. Tony accepts a task he cannot refuse.
He's not your ordinary drug dealer.
That is our problem.
No problem.
Good.
Frustrated and envious, Skinner watches Gusteau's renaissance from a distance. Growing increasingly desperate, he calls the health inspector to investigate a rat problem, but short on availability, the health inspector rebuffs Skinner and delays any potential inspection for the next 3 months.
3 months.
It must happen now. You must stole my documents.
Meanwhile, Linguini has become a formal representative of the new Gusteaus, partaking in photo shoots and interviews, hogging the limelight, and ignoring his responsibilities to the restaurant.
Oh, he should have finished an hour ago.
Feeling full of himself, he discounts Remy and argues with Colette. But as he gloats and lies his way through yet another string of questions, Anton ego intrudes in a grand fashion.
You are Monsieur Linguini.
Oh, hello.
Exchanging both threats and witty remarks, Linguini and Ego butt heads as Colette and Remy can only watch on. But Ego has the final word.
The rules. I will return tomorrow night with high expectations.
Remy and Linguini have been delivered a challenge they cannot refuse.
Don't give me that look. You were distracting me in front of the press.
Enraged at Remy for constantly yanking his hair in fits of anger, as well as Remy's staunch refusal to recognize Colette's input and talent, Linguini scolds and subsequently throws him out into the alley. Linguini yells at Remy as Skinner observes from above and discovers the true nature of their dynamic. As Remy begins to rage and break things, he runs into Emile and his friends, patiently waiting to ask for more food. Consumed by spite, Remy offers up the full extent of the kitchen fridge, conspiring to return after closing with the entire colony.
Dinner's on me.
Remy and his father break into the kitchen immediately after closing, and the entire clan follows, tactically and efficiently raiding the fridge. As they work, they hear the rustling of keys, and Linguini enters just as they scramble into the shadows. Finding Remy alone, Linguini proceeds to make a heartfelt apology that Remy genuinely begins to accept. But as they speak, Emile, still in the fridge, accidentally alerts Linguini to their presence, and the colony is discovered. Feeling the full force of Remy's betrayal, Linguini grabs a mop and forces the colony out into the alley, threatening to kill Remy if he ever returns. His friendship with Linguini fractured and his dreams dashed, Remy walks out into the streets as the sign over Gusteau's turns off for the night. Feeling the weight of a federal investigation, blissfully coked out and surrounded by the upper class, Tony endures dinner with his wife and Manny. He defers leadership to Manny while he's away in New York, but casts blame on him for their current situation, holding Manny responsible for inadvertently connecting them with an undercover cop.
Yeah, what that fucking cider about?
As Elvira takes a bump at the dinner table and refuses to eat her meal, Tony starts on a long tirade, disparaging her in front of the entire restaurant. He complains about her extensive drug use, frequent catatonic states, and her inability to carry a child to term.
I can't even have a kid with her, man.
Pushed to her breaking point, Elvira lashes out and shouts Tony down in front of everyone, noting his hypocritical drug use and how being a killer disqualifies him from the potential of being a good and worthy father. Tony explodes and lunges across the table. Manny jumps in, succeeds in pulling Tony away, and a distraught Elvira leaves Tony for good. As silence fills the restaurant, Tony takes note of the crowd they've drawn. Addressing the dining room, he parades his many failures in front of them and claims them a success.
You don't have the guts to be what you want to be. So say good night to the bad guy. Come on. The last time you're going to see a bad guy like this again, let me tell you.
In New York, Tony and a small crew, including Alberto, a close ally of Sosa, scope out their target before his speech at the UN. As he enters his hotel room for the night, Alberto plants a bomb under his car. The following morning, Tony and his crew wait for him to depart for the General Assembly, where they plan to detonate the device in front of the UN building. Tony slams a rail before they initiate the plan, but unexpectedly, their target makes a U-turn and picks up his wife and 2 kids. Upon seeing the rest of the family, Tony, suddenly of moral character, makes his unwillingness to kill women and children clear and argues with Alberto. Those concerns are pushed aside. Prompted to proceed with the plan, they tail their target. As they close in on their destination, Tony watches the children play in the back of their father's car, and Alberto savors the moment before the kill. Tensions rise as Tony voices his displeasure and Alberto primes the device. But before he can push the button, Tony pulls his gun and shoots him in the head at point-blank range, cursing him as he bleeds all over the interior. Ernie and Chi-Chi can do nothing but watch on as Tony loses his cool and seals their fates. Aware of the trouble they are in, Tony makes a call to Miami and attempts to rally Manny and the rest of his crew, but Manny is nowhere to be found. Gina is missing as well.
Your mama called. Gina's gone.
In a rage, Tony rushes back home.
I'm coming back tonight. This fucking cocksucker.
Do you know what you would like to see?
Plagued by nightmares, Linguini dreams of Ego and his impending doom. Startled awake by Colette, he's prompted to rally the kitchen staff with a speech, but unable to find the confidence to rise to the challenge, his words fail him and cast doubt on his leadership. As Remy watches Linguini's spectacular failure from the window, Emile is nearly caught in a trap. Springing into action, Remy manages to save him, but is caught instead. Emile promises to free him as Skinner reveals himself and gloats. He places Remy in the trunk of his car, offering him indentured servitude, making frozen foods in exchange for his life.
Will not kill you.
As Ego arrives at Gusteau's, he intimidates and intentionally confuses the waitstaff, making a show of his presence and demanding a meal that represents the chef's perspective.
I want whatever he dares to serve me. Tell him to hit me with his best shot.
As Remy resigns himself to his fate, Gusteau appears. Feeling stuck between two worlds, he grows angry at his constant need to pretend simply to get by. Growing increasingly bitter, he rails against Gusteau, insisting that he knows who he is. The chef agrees, places a hand on his shoulder, and fades away. As Remy is left in the dark by himself, a stone gargoyle crashes through the roof of the trunk, allowing his father and brother to free him. Remy embraces them both and leaps from the trunk into the busy streets of Paris. Unshaken in his identity as a cook, Remy runs back to the restaurant. Unable to recreate Remy's recipes by himself, Linguini loses what little control he has of the situation, and the kitchen erupts into chaos. In a violent panic, he runs into his office and hides from the crew. As the staff fiercely debates what to do, Remy bursts through the door against his family's wishes and is spotted by the entire kitchen. The crew grab their knives and rush at Remy as he shuts his eyes and invites them to do their worst. But before they can reach him, he's saved by Linguini, and they begin to explain everything.
He's been hiding under my toe.
Speaking from the heart, he credits Remy for all of his success and attempts to rally everyone around him and his talent.
I can cook the food that's exciting everyone.
Remy accepts his apology, and their bond is restored.
This brilliant little chef can lead us there.
But silence fills the room as the staff consider how to respond. Thinking that Linguini's lost his mind, or found a convenient way to throw in the towel, they resign en masse. As Colette follows suit, she raises her hand to strike Linguini, but decides against it. She walks out into the alley in tears. Distraught and alone, Linguini looks out into the dining room and accepts defeat. Arriving back in Miami, Tony directs his men to continue searching for Manny. All the while, his mother has been calling in hysterics, and Sosa is waiting on the line that very moment. Answering the call, Tony lays the blame on Alberto and downplays the significance of the botched job, insisting that it can be done later on his terms. Sosa, enraged and displeased, cuts Tony loose and begins preparations to eliminate him. Tony is going to war. Tony makes his way to his mother's home, where she details Gina's changing attitude and her suspicion of a secret lover. Railing at Tony for the misfortunes he has brought to their family, he leaves to find Gina at the mansion their mother tracked her down to. As Tony and crew arrive in Coconut Grove, he walks past marble statues up to an opulent door and rings the bell. Dressed in a bathrobe, Manny answers the door and greets Tony as a brother. Gina smiles down from the balcony overhead. Seeing the two of them together, a wrathful scowl grows on Tony's face, and he fires 2 shots into Manny, where he collapses to the cold floor. Gina rushes down from the spiral staircase to her husband's side as he bleeds onto the marble. They were married just a day ago.
Just yesterday. We were gonna surprise you.
Gina mourns and wails as Tony's men grab her and drag her to the car. she screams in Tony's face. Gina, in a frenzy, fights back not to enter Tony's home, but his men overpower her, and she's dragged inside. In the distance, men clad in black rush to the outer walls, climb over, and breach the perimeter. Having killed his best friend, lost the love of his life, and alienated what remains of his family, Tony goes to town on a mountain of cocaine, unaware of the invasion taking place on his CCTV system. Unable or unwilling to hear the concern in his men's voices, Tony insists that their next move is to go to war with Sosa and win. He buries himself in more cocaine. Reeling and off balance, he collapses into his chair and, finally recognizing what he just did, mourns Manny for the first time. Lost in a haze, he's unaware as Sosa's death squad begins their assault and storms through, brutally and methodically slaughtering his men. Just as a would-be assassin scales Tony's home into his office, Gina, mentally and spiritually broken, enters with a gun. Accusing Tony of a deep perversion, she fires at him and nails him in the leg with her third shot. Tony collapses to the ground, Gina empties her gun, and the assassin springs through the window. Leaping into action, Tony tackles the assassin and throws him over the balcony where he falls into the pool below, finishing him off with his own gun. Looking out over his estate, Tony finally sees Sosa's men flood in by the dozens. Tony rushes to Gina's side as the hit men breach the mansion, but she's already gone. He apologizes to her corpse. Mumbling and incoherent, Tony ignores the last of his men as they're gunned down just outside of his office. Making promises to Gina's lifeless body, he gathers the courage to raid his gun locker and prepares for his final showdown. Blasting through the door with a grenade launcher, Tony marches through the smoke like a man possessed, laying waste to Sosa's army. Emerging from the shadows, an assassin in a trench coat and dark shades silently strides up from the rear and blows Tony away with a shotgun. Tony reels forward and collapses into the fountain below as we pan up to a glowing neon message. The world is yours. As Linguini goes to hide in his office, Remy stands alone in the center of the kitchen, ruminating on his failure. Accepting defeat, he turns to leave and finds his dad behind him. Embarrassed and expecting a lecture, Remy begins to apologize, but his dad cuts him off. Proven wrong by Linguini, seeing his son's courage and understanding the importance of this moment, he calls out with a whistle, and the entire colony comes running.
We're not cooks, but we are family.
His family pledge to help him. Their moment of unity is interrupted by a surprise visit from the health inspector. Seeing hundreds of rats in a kitchen, the man turns and flees in horror, but not before a number of them can catch him. With the health inspector handled for the moment, Remy begins dictating stations to his family. Dozens of rats, now fluffy and sterilized, rush to take care of their assigned tasks as Remy leads their final assault. As Linguini peeks through the blinds of his office, he sees the massive effort happening in the kitchen and follows their lead, waiting tables and attending to the customers. Outside, Colette rides through the streets of Perce and nearly drives into oncoming traffic at full speed. Sliding to a stop, she takes a breather and notices something. A bookstore with a very familiar face in its window. Back in the kitchen, the colony works tirelessly with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine, tenderizing meats, grating cheeses, and stirring sauces as Remy commands the room like a 4-star general. As they begin to plate their dishes, Colette walks in to see the rats at work and nearly runs out in disgust before Linguini rushes to her side and hugs her.
Colette, wait! Colette.
Convinced to stay, Colette takes Remy's lead and asks what dish he wants to prepare for Ego. Handing her the recipe card, she reads it aloud.
Ratatouille.
Preparing every ingredient and following each step with a fine attention to detail, Colette and Remy plate the final dish, and Linguini gracefully delivers it to Ego. In an instant, his eyes go wide, and he's thrust back in time to a moment that still echoes in his head, when the same dish cooked by his mother brought comfort and warmth to his heart. And as the color returns to his gaunt face, he devours his dinner with enthusiasm. Skinner, also impressed, angrily barges into the kitchen, only to be thrown into the fridge with the health inspector. Having polished off his plate, Ego is thoroughly satisfied and attempts to thank Linguini for his meal, but Linguini asserts that he had no hand in it.
I'm just your waiter.
Ego, ever the gentleman that he is, insists on meeting the chef and is told that he'll have to wait until closing to do so.
You'll have to wait until all the other customers have gone.
Linguini and Colette exit the kitchen and approach him at his table. They present Linguini's toque and lift it to reveal Remy.
At first, Ego thinks it's a joke.
The trio spends the evening walking him through the kitchen and their process as he remains outwardly stoic, only breaking a silence to ask the occasional question. At the end of the night, he thanks them for his meal and leaves. Unsure of the impression they made, our trio anxiously awaits his review, knowing only that they did their best. The following morning, they awake to a spectacular and glowing review. Rocked to his very core, Ego is a man changed by his experience, and realizes that his unique position affords him the opportunity to defend and advocate for the new. He now understands what Gusteau meant when he wrote that anyone can cook. As Remy recounts the events that follow, we learn that Gusteau's was almost immediately shut down due to a rat infestation. As we come to the present day, Remy is seen telling the story to a dinner table full of rats who doubt his words. Confident, he invites them to see for themselves as they peer from an overlook into a crowded dining room where Ego sits at the center. Remy plates one final dish, and Linguini delivers it to a happy and full-faced Ego. We pull back to reveal a fully packed restaurant. Remy's cooking nourishes friends, family, and customers of all sizes, serving humans and rats alike with a line stretching out the door. As we pan up from the street to a sign hanging over the restaurant awning, the Eiffel Tower in the distance. Disney's The Lion King is a 1994 animated feature film about a prince desperate to avenge his father and reclaim his throne from his uncle. Holding several records for box office gross and the subject of universal critical acclaim for nearly 3 decades, I'm going to assume you've watched or that you're at least familiar with it. But I don't think most are aware that The Lion King is Hamlet. This isn't me presenting a new theory or original thought. I encourage you to Google this when you have the time, but it's a well-documented fact that the film is simply a retelling of the classic Shakespeare play. And either intentionally or through accidental recreation, they share the same base structures and character dynamics. Mufasa is the ghost of Hamlet's father. Scar is Claudius, Timon and Pumbaa are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and of course, Simba is Hamlet himself. Though the similarities don't end there. Disney is not unfamiliar with this method of storytelling. In fact, the company was established primarily through recreations of fairy tales and stories in the public domain. The reason I point any of this out is to emphasize the nature of story structure and provide an example of this phenomenon in action. Now, of course, our two films are not one-to-one scale models of each other, much like how The Lion King and Hamlet are not exactly the same. A film about a Cuban drug lord killing his way to the top and a film about a rat who cooks good are not ever going to be the same, but they can share the same structure. Having made mistakes and enemies that wish to kill him, our hero is separated from his family and washes up on the shore of a new world. Aspiring to greater heights, relegated to the gutter, and falling into further danger, he takes the first opportunity he has to anchor himself in this new environment. Side by side with a close friend, also new to this world, they rise to the challenge and succeed in impressing a core power broker. Unwilling to settle for what they've achieved, they quickly become a thorn in the side of those above them, and are assigned a task meant to eliminate them from the game. Our duo succeeds again, in a victory that inconveniences the powers that be, but rather than acceptance, they're brought in closer by their enemies to be kept within reach. Having established himself and reaping the rewards of his efforts, our hero visits his family with good news, but all goes wrong. Lovingly accepted in by a sibling and shunned for his choices by a parental figure, he rejects their worldview and doubles down. While he focuses on next steps, his best friend, a brother-in-arms, becomes entangled romantically, distracting him from their shared goals. In the background, new and larger powers work to shift the balance, and current powers begin to see our lead as a threat that must be eliminated. Concentrated on keeping what he's earned up to this point, our lead finds it difficult to keep his partner focused and in the game, and is left playing for two. With his partner involved in a growing romance, our lead is pushed aside and in this brief separation, nearly killed. Having survived a life-threatening ordeal, he rebels against the old guard and succeeds in establishing a new regime. Following this triumph, a new life emerges for everyone in proximity. Power consolidates, business flourishes, romances deepen, family is corrupted, and new threats lurk on the horizon. Growing accustomed to this new lifestyle, but craving different things, our lead and his partner begin to pull away from one another, and as fortune and fame strain their bond, they become resentful of one another and sloppy. As their control wanes, threats of the future become threats of the present, and our duo has no choice but to rise to the occasion. However, the pressure of these new threats are enough to drive them apart. In a moment of poor judgment and spite, our hero lashes out, and the end results are explosive. Separated, the two must fend for themselves. Left behind to hold down the fort, our secondary protagonist fails to take charge and retreats from the group. Meanwhile, our lead becomes trapped in a situation he despises, held under penalty of death to commit to something he wants no part in. Stewing in his anger, he has a self-affirming moment of clarity and breaks free of his obligation. Aware of the impending storm, he runs back home to rally the troops. Arriving back, he is not immediately welcomed with open arms, but committed to what he believes in and values, pushes through anyway, though this is not without consequence and results in permanent damage to the relationships he's worked so hard to build. Left alone and with enemies outside his door, he prepares for his final battle and faces his fate. Scarface is nearly 3 hours long. Ratatouille is just under 2. But despite obvious differences in runtime and premise, both stories play out with near-identical beats occurring almost in sync. Where our paths diverge is in the final act. Scarface is based on previously written material, and as such, it follows its logical conclusion. Ratatouille is a Disney movie, and Disney movies need a lesson and a happy ending. But interestingly, they still both share the same final obstacle: ego. While I also mean the character, I largely mean that on the long list of flaws exhibited by Remy and Tony, their first and most glaring one is their ego. Established early on, we know that they ignore and dismiss the people in their life who care most. It's undeniable that they're good at what they do, but unwilling to allow input from others, they become stifled and unable to respond to new challenges. This is their fatal flaw. Whether our characters succeed or fail, live or die, hinges on their ability to acknowledge how their egos have led them astray and course correct by reconciling their differences with others. Tony is unable to do so. Rather than listen to Manny, he kills him and any slim chance they had of getting through this together. Tony only comes to realize his mistake in his final moments. Linguini humbles himself and apologizes to Remy. And Remy allows himself to lead and rely on others without doing it all himself, fully trusting in his team for the first time. Facing sudden death, Tony and Remy embrace what comes.
So this is the part where I ruined the video. I had a couple sections throughout the video, and especially here at the end of the video, that I cut because it just wasn't making any sense. And I think the reason it didn't make any sense is because I wasn't dealing directly with why I care about this so much. I think I was trying to deflect from my passion for Ratatouille specifically by having sections where I tried to be more clever or more analytical than I already have been at this point. And that's not even to suggest that I think I'm like clever and smart. That's really just to say like I'm aware that this is like a long-winded experiment and it's probably like a little too galaxy brain for the average YouTube video. And I don't say that in a self-deprecating way, but kind of in a self-aware way. Point is, I was avoiding talking about why I give a shit. Ever since I saw Ratatouille for the first time, it just kind of clicked in a way that other movies haven't. I don't remember if I saw Scarface first or Ratatouille first. I think I saw them around the same age anyway. For Scarface's part, it's a movie I didn't really like until I started doing this video, splicing it up and like really getting in its guts. And I appreciate it now more than I have probably ever in the time I've been alive. So that's an interesting development. Ratatouille, though, is different. I feel the way I feel about that film because more so than any other movie I've seen, I feel like Remy. I have a passion and a drive for this one thing that makes me happy, indescribably happy. And I feel throughout my body when I'm involved in it. I love film, and it's something I feel throughout my body, the way that Remy feels food throughout his body. That it's not just a singular sense, it's all of them all together. And I don't want to go on a long-winded thing about like talent and whether or not I have it, whether or not Remy has it. I know I'm good at what I do. Remy knows he's good at what he does. And there's an ego in that. There's an ego in him, and there's an ego I see in myself that I know has caused friction in my life, like it has in his. But there's also a part of me that sees what he goes through and knows that some of it is not fair. He is by nature an anomaly in his space, and for that, people want to kill him. And there's something deeply relatable about that if you've ever been in an environment where simply for being different or good at what you do, or more than likely both, people will see that as a problem and try to crush you. Is there ego in saying that I know I'm good at what I do? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to deny that. But there's also a self-deprecation required if I were to do the opposite. And I've spent too many years self-deprecating and putting myself in boxes and not being me. And after a year going through what I went through, I don't want to do that ever again. especially if people are going to try to kill me anyway. Since starting this project, I've just wanted to be more sincere and steer away from where I thought I needed to go to make something good. What I'm getting at is this. If confidence and sincerity in equal measure are going to get me killed regardless, then why shouldn't I be? And I just hope other people feel that when they watch this movie too.
Thank you so much for watching this video. This was not meant to be an hour-long plus monstrosity, but it turned out to be an hour-plus monstrosity. So, if you watched this whole thing, thank you for taking a big chunk of your day to do so. I know that's a lot to ask of people, but I really, really appreciate that anyone would do that. So, thank you. This is a new channel, and I'm just starting out, so every like, every comment, every subscription really, really helps. So please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really like this video, please share it with a loved one. I would really appreciate that. On to more specific housekeeping. I have a Twitter, I have a letterboxd, I have an Instagram that I use sometimes, and now I have a Patreon. Right now I'm putting things up for free because I don't really have anything to offer. I do have a $1 tier, and I'm going to figure out rewards soon. I'm thinking either streaming on Twitch partially or doing director's commentary. I'm not quite sure. Early access will definitely be part of it, but I'm still growing this channel and I'm still figuring out the ropes, so that'll come with time. There will be more announced soon, but for now, thank you again for watching. Thank you for liking and commenting and subscribing. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Okay, money.